The Eotech G33 3X Magnifier is assembled in the USA, comes with a street price in the mid to high 500s, and is apparently the only magnifier under contract with Socom, or at least so Eotech claims on their website. So right off the bat, this is a far cry from the G30 Chinese-made magnifier that I reviewed many years ago. The plastic hard case this magnifier comes in is quite nice. The fitted foam inside holds everything nice and snug even in transport, and it's a really good display for a product that you're spending a decent amount of money on. It comes right out of the box with basically everything you need to assemble it on your rifle, including different height mounts and different screws for said mounts. The actual mount, however, that you will attach to your rifle is a tilt-away, which I quite like. It's very robust, it feels really good in hand, and I've seen this mount being used on other magnifiers, which we'll touch on very soon. All in all, it's a very solid feeling base, and something that I wouldn't mind running myself. As far as the physical overview of this mount, it feels really good in hand. The rubberized coating on the outside does feel pretty tight to the body, so it doesn't really feel like there's that much play to it, and all the controls just have a very good qualitative feel to them, with the exception of the elevation and windage turrets. Again, they're more set up like target turrets on a precision rifle scope, except these don't have detents, and in my opinion, they don't have enough resistance to stay put when you don't want them to move. As far as the fast focus eyepiece found in the rear, it's got pretty good resistance on it, but when you pull it all the way out and put it a quarter turn in and then wiggle it, you do feel a fair amount of wiggle, but that's not that uncommon even on some pretty high-end stuff. As far as the weight, Eotech claims 10.6 ounces on their website, but I get a little bit over 11 ounces on my scale. I think a lot of that has to do with the spacer and the extra long screws to accommodate that, and my scale maybe being a few percent off, so all in all, it's right on target with where it should be. The last thing to look at before we get behind this thing is how it looks on a rail, especially behind an optic. For an optic, I chose the lead and steel LP1 because that's the only real optic I had lying around other than the 512, and it doesn't have a quick release, so I didn't feel like pulling the tool out. Yeah, I'm very lazy, and that's how you know. Anyway, that is going to conclude this general physical overview. Let's get behind this thing and see if it's worth its near $600 price tag. Before we start looking through the optic, let's just take a real good long look at what the weather is today. This was filmed in the middle of the summer, and we had beautiful bright blue skies without a cloud in sight. The trees were green and lush, and the winds were nice and calm. It was truly a beautiful, beautiful day. The eye relief on this is about 2.2 inches, and that's going to play dividends because there are some that have longer eye relief and some that have shorter eye relief, and the difference is basically going to be the perceived view looking through it. As far as the field of view, this is actually pretty damn impressive at an acclaimed 38.3 feet at 100 yards. So times that by 4, and that's what you're going to be able to see right here on that brick building. That is a pretty large field of view and something that is very nice to see in a magnifier. Again, part of that has to do with how close this scope is to the eye. When we start getting into the comparison sections, you'll see that a lot of them float around the 2.5 inch, and believe it or not, that extra 3/8 of an inch really does add up. The image looking through this by itself is gorgeous. The colors are very representative of what we see to real life. Just take a look at the sky. It might be a little bit on the duller side as far as the blue outside the scope as opposed to looking through it, but other than that, the rest of the image is very nice. Another thing to note is the image is fairly flat, which we'll touch on very soon, but that's also very nice. As opposed to the Trijico 3X, where it did have some noticeable fisheye, this doesn't seem to have any apparent fisheye whatsoever, which does make the overall experience behind it very, very pleasurable. But using a magnifier by itself isn't really all that crazy. It's when you put an optic in front of it, if you can tell if it's worth its weight in gold. Putting the LP1 again in front of it, because this is the best quality optic that I had at the time, you'll see that when it's in place, it really doesn't change all that much with the exception of a little black bar up top. That is actually the inside of the LP1, again, primarily because the field of view on this thing is so large. For some people, that'll be a nuisance. For others, they won't even notice that it's there. And for others, they'll only care about the overall sharpness to the reticle and the image behind it or looking through the optic in front. And I am delighted to say that both of these, the LP1 and the G33, when working in conjunction like this, produce, frankly, an image that is breathtaking. Look at how sharp everything is, from that 30-yard telephone pole right in front of us to the 900-yard power towers out at distance. Everything is wonderful. And that is about as good as that reticle is going to look. It might not be the best optic on the market, but truth be told, for its price point, I have yet to be disappointed with it. To stir things up, I'm going to put the tried and true Holosun 512 gold dot in front. Now, it's true, the 512 is something that I quite like and I fancy, and I appreciate and respect it, which is why I've kept it in the roster. But under magnification, most Holosun products don't look that great. However, in this case, it's only the reticle that doesn't look great. The image still looks pretty good, even though there is a little bit more blue tint. You'll note that the center dot is more of a rugby ball than it is a nice, beautiful soccer ball, just to put it in sports where even the Europeans can understand it. As far as how the turrets move in conjunction with looking through the scope, I am adjusting clearly the elevation right now and the windage ever so slightly. Again, those black bars are the body of the red dot that we are looking through, even though it's a yellow dot. I know, nuances, just go with me, folks. They pop up when we get to the extremes of looking through the scope, again, primarily because the field of view on this magnifier is so large. I honestly would rather have a larger field of view all the time, even if it does present some, I'm going to say, aesthetically not pleasing artifacts like looking through the scope body of even a large windowed scope like the 512 or the LP1. Despite how little I like the quick adjust turrets on this thing, one area where I have to give it credit is going to be with its eyebox and overall image stability when you get really off this thing. Literally going from one extreme to the next, side to side with the perfect eye relief set. You can see we could look through this thing all the way out into the shadows. Nothing really changes as far as sharpness or clarity to the image. It's beautiful from edge to edge. But what happens if we get behind it in a little bit more dynamic of a sense? Well, really throwing our eyeball around this thing shows that it's still very usable even when you choke up on it. Let's say if you're going prone, if this thing is perfectly set for your eye, seated or standing, or vice versa. You can get really far away from this thing and still manage a very good view looking through it. Obviously, magnifiers aren't ideal for a super huge eyebox, considering they're little micro prisms that are designed to fit a very specific role, typically be fairly small and lightweight to not add too much bulk. But truth be told, this thing is very impressive. And let me have that impressiveness roll with you a little bit further as we start making some head-to-head comparisons between the G33, which will be on the left for the remainder of this video, and its competitor to the right. The competitors on this are in no particular order, so just roll with it. First is going to be the Trijico 3X. I really like this thing. It is very lightweight, very small, and offers really good eye relief and still maintains a very high field of view. They are apparently made in the Philippines, but for the street price of around $400, I am willing to accept that. Here is a perfect case in point of what about 4/10 of an inch, almost a half an inch, will give you prospectively when you're looking through these things. There's a big difference here. Granted, the center isn't perfect on both of them. The Trijicon's farther to the left, which is why we see less of the telephone pole, but we do have, again, that little bit over an extra foot lack of field of view. When we get behind them, you can clearly see that when we have everything more or less zeroed in roughly the same place, the view looking through both of these LP1s at the same time is a little bit closer and true to form. With the Trijico, I didn't have the cleanest video when I filmed with that, just because I am not that consistent sometimes, especially when it's doing magnifiers, because I honestly don't get my hands on a lot of them. But the image through both of these is quite good, even though with the Trijico, it does seem a little bit more muted, but that had a lot to do with the environmentals that day. Touching back on again that the Trijico does have some fisheyeing effect, you could see that clearly with the telephone pole to the right. The G33 has none, the Trijico does have a bit, but despite that, the price savings of going with the Trijico and the overall size and weight and that extra eye relief does play dividends if you want to compare one versus the other. Both of these, however, are very good, and I don't think you can go wrong with either of them. By the way, they both run the exact same tilt-away mount. Next up is the Burris AR Tripler, which I had very limited experience with behind other optics, primarily because the mount that it was fixed in, and I didn't want to take it apart from the guy, is set up for, it was what, like 2 1/4? Yeah, 2 1/4 from a Unity mount, and I didn't want to play with it too much. However, this is a discontinued magnifier, but I threw it in here because it's, again, another 3x magnifier, which, honestly, the experience behind it was quite nice. You could find these things for like the mid to low 200s. These will be a couple of ounces lighter, even though, again, I had it in a Unity mount. Its field of view is claimed to be 44 feet, though. That's massive, and the eye relief is set for 2.5 inches as opposed to 2.25, and you can very clearly see that there's more of the image looking through with the AR tripler than it is with the G33. Now, unfortunately, with the AR tripler, I was limited to use this with the Trijico Tri-Power, but fortunately enough, the Trijico Tri-Power had very good glass, even though it had a very small tube looking through it, which is why you see that darkening shadow to the edge. It was as good as I could do with what I had. As far as the image looking through the AR tripler, it's also very impressive. It is sharp and clear. Again, though, there is going to be some things that you might want to take into consideration, like not only price, but availability. However, if you can find the AR tripler for around the $200 that you sometimes do find them at, it's a third the price of the G33. But the G33 might be more or less a better cohesive overall magnifier experience. But if you're looking for a budget option, something like the AR tripler is definitely something to consider. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking. See, if the G33 is available and the G43 and the G45, why wouldn't I just spend about $100 more and get the G45, which offers 5 times magnification as opposed to 3x? Well, let me tell you something. Just because something is more in one way, shape, or form doesn't make it better. And the reason for that is a magnifier doesn't just magnify itself, it magnifies the glass that's in front of it. If you put something like an LP1, which does have very good quality glass, it's fine. If you put it behind an Eotech EXPS 3-0, that's going to be fine. But if you put it behind something of lesser quality, and I mean even slightest bit lesser quality, like the Holosun 512 or even the 403C, you are going to note that the image does fall apart rather quickly. It also lets in less light. As far as the field of view, the 45 claims to have 23.1 feet, but it does have a much longer eye relief at 2.6 inches. Again, these are assembled in the USA. Just because you have more of something doesn't necessarily make it better. The eye relief on the G45 might be farther, but the Eyebox is very tight. It's not an apples to apples comparison. I really do think the sweet spot is going to be 3x for a magnifier. Well, if you could make the comparison with the G45, why not make it with the G30? Well, that's very true, so I will roll this in just for shits and giggles. The G30 is a Chinese-made magnifier. There's no two ways about it. It has a very shitty mount, which is not tilt-away. It's a rigid mount with a very shitty QD locking system and a very shitty tensioner adjustment for the QD lever. And for the $300 that it cost, yes, it did have a very good-looking image, especially behind the StrikeFire 2 as seen here, and a large view looking through it. In fact, the field of view is rated about the same as the G33 at 38.2 feet with the exact same eye relief. It almost makes me wonder if maybe these two are actually the same, but one's assembled in China and one's assembled in the US. I will let the conspiracy theorists realize and think about that one for a little bit, but for me, I couldn't get away from how shitty the mount was. Now, truth be told, maybe you can just get another mount for the G30, which you absolutely can. But then you start getting to the same price point similar to the G33, and at least the G33 has a really cool rubberized texture, and you can get an FDE, so that's automatically the winner. At least for me, that is. But if you don't mind something being made in China, why not spend literally less than half the price for an HM3X? Now, yes, the HM3X does have a couple things going against it as opposed to even the G30. They are both made in China. They are both 3Xs. The field of view isn't as good with the HM3X. It's about 36.7 feet, so about a foot and a half shy, but the eye relief is 2.7 feet, which is why 2.7 inches, which is why when we look through it, we see more of the scope body and the image seems a little bit farther away because it's literally a half-inch farther away. So if you're worried about scope bite or you want a better sense of your overall surroundings, something like the HM3X might be a better choice for you. However, just note that the mounting setup is proprietary, the mounting footprint. So if you want to put it on a different mount, you're kind of SOL. You got to run what Holosun gives you, and that's a bit of a bummer. But for the average $200 that the HM3X costs off sale, it's a really good bargain. And when it goes on sale and they go for like $150 or less that I've seen lately, man, oh man, does it offer some pretty damn good performance for the price. There is an absolute massive amount of competition in the 3X magnifier department, but not many of them can say that they are at least assembled in the US, nor can they say that they're used by Socom. The G33 is one such rarity that can claim both. Yes, you do pay a premium for it. Mid to high 500s, Normally, I'm sure you could find them on sale for less, and you could even find them as part of like a package deal with some other Eotech products like an EXPS for, I've seen them for like around $1,000. That's honestly starting to get into the price point where it's like, oh, that's really not too bad. As long as you're excited for what you are getting with both the holographic Eotech, whether it be an XPS, an EXPS, a 2 or 3, whatever, and the G33. It does offer really, really phenomenal image quality. The overall physicality, the way it feels, the way it's assembled, feels really good as well, even though there are some parts that I can certainly nitpick to death. The mount, however, is not one of them. The mount feels wonderful. It feels very rigid, has really tight lockup. Everything on it feels like it's going to last the test of time. And it's the exact same base that we both had with the G45 and with the Trijico 3X. So it's definitely being made in massive numbers and sold to everybody, and that's a good thing, because if you do decide you have to replace it, or if it gets damaged and no one wants to warranty it, you could at least find replacement parts for it fairly cheap, if not an entire unit. Ultimately, the fact that it's got a standard footprint for its 2-bolt mount is also really nice, because if you want to put this in a Unity mount, you can do that, no questions asked. The only thing that really would keep me from this is one of its selling points that a lot of people like, and that is the quick adjust elevation and windage turrets. For me, I'm a set and forget kind of guy. Even if you take this on and off the rail and it does change the zero a little bit, what does it really matter? It's a magnifier. As long as the reticle is sharp, clear, and mostly in the center, I really don't care. It's not like you're throwing the zero off of a very important precision rifle. It's just the way you look through the magnifier, through whatever thing you're magnifying, whether it be a red dot or a holographic sight. As long as, again, it's mostly in the center, who really cares? In my opinion, I think there's much more to go wrong with exposed, unlocking, non-detented, very easy to turn target turrets on a magnifier than something like anything else that we looked at, with the exception of the other Eotech products. Besides that, though, this is a wonderful magnifier. And if you're in the market for one and you want something that is, again, at least assembled in the US, that isn't going to break the bank for a product that is assembled in the US and has all the features that you like, then this G33 is something that you should probably consider. If not, there are plenty of alternatives, and none of which that I think you could really go wrong with. However, I will maintain, stick with a 3X. Anything beyond that, I think is a fool's errand. With that, thank you all very much for watching. And as always, see you again next time. And a huge thank you to my Patreon providers and my Subscribe Star subscribers. Without you, this truly wouldn't be possible. If you'd like to support my channel but don't want to join either of those, I completely understand. But you could still help by using my affiliate links in the description below, and or like, share, and subscribe as always. Again, thank you very much.